Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I really enjoyed getting to know Jim McCafferty better. His writings are really terrific. So if you get the opportunity, go purchase his books that we talked about. They're the kind that will sit on coffee tables, and you go back to them time and time again because the storytelling is incredible, and it does remind you the way it was back in the Mississippi Delta back in the days. And we talk about habitat loss and all of that. You can see the way it was, and then think about the way it is today, and then you wonder what's the contributing factor of loss of habitat to duck migrations and things like that. But we're still the capital of the outdoors in America, and I will continue to say that every week. But I really enjoyed visiting with Jim, that's for sure. Now let's shift gears. I want to move over to my friend Brent Madden, who's Major Brent Madden. The last time he was on the show, he was captain. He got a promotion back around July, and he's over conservation officers. He's actually sitting, as we speak, at the training academy for conservation officers. We'll talk through all of that. But before we go any further, let me welcome Brent back to the show. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. It's good to be back.
So for people who can't see where you're sitting right now, it looks like a great training facility.
Yes, sir. It's we've been here, I think, since 2002 or 2003. This is where we start them up at. This is where they grow up into officers, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we're in Holmes County on the backside of Holmes County State Park.
That's very interesting. I spend time in that area. I have to swing by there sometimes and take a look at it in person. You and I talked about this before, and before we get done, we'll talk about requirements for becoming a conservation officer. I want to really get into the kind of training that's taking place there right now. But the job of a conservation officer has changed dramatically over the years. The kind of responsibility they have, as we've discussed before, 99% of the people they come in contact with are law-abiding citizens, but they got to be prepared for that 1%. And they have a lot of responsibility. They're often out there alone. There's a lot to learn to be effective and to do it safely. And you're pretty committed to that, aren't you?
Yes, sir. I've been at the training academy for about 9 years. And, we probably say it 20 times a day. Everything that we do here is for a reason, from, the way that they march, the way they carry themselves, the way they talk, the way that they're supposed to think before they say anything. And most of all is, the way to treat people. We start that from day one till they graduate 6 months later.
Yes. What's interesting, and maybe you and I have talked about this before, but on my other show, the Ricky Matthews Show, I have police chiefs on from time to time. And we talk about that, that in certain situations that police officers, and you're no different for conservation officers, you got to be a little bit of a lawyer. You got to be a little bit of a psychologist. You got to be a little bit of a law enforcement officer. It requires you to hit on a lot of cylinders to be great at what you do. Actually, to be effective at all, you've got to be a little bit of both of those, all three of those things, don't you?
That's right. But, it's when we start doing defensive tactics and firearms qualifications, things of that nature, we start from that point, teaching them that the most effective tool that they have is their mouth, the way they talk to people. Most situations you can talk your way out of and talk people down. And most of it starts off. You determine the way that conversation or that interaction is going to go just by the way you start that conversation or interaction off.
One of the great things about these reality shows that are on that involve conservation officers, one in the Yellowstone area that I watch from time to time, I love that part of the country, is that very thing. I mean, just the way you deal with, even in tough situations, the way you communicate with someone can really change whether this thing turns bad or not. And so you got to prepare them for, if it turns bad, this is what you better do to save yourself. But the goal is not to have a bad turning situation, even when the situation is a tough situation to begin with. And I bet you spend a lot of time in that space, don't you?
Yes, sir. I mean, it comes in waves, especially officers in the field. when it comes to, the hunting seasons. Obviously deer season is very, very busy. Turkey season is very, very busy. And a lot of people, we hear all the time, this time of year, man, y'all fixing to get busy, ain't you? Yes, that's correct. But most places that have a lot of water, we're just as busy during the summertime as we are during the winter. And that's just the law enforcement side of it. You factor in working the Ames tournament and MSSP tournaments. We stay pretty busy year round. And in that, we're constantly having to deal with people, talk to people. And that's not even including the just general public programs where, we may go talk to hunting camps or certain clubs, things of that nature.
Brent, you know what's interesting? I've had the opportunity over the course of a long history to be able to chat with conservation officers. And what I find is if there's this sort of enduring core value, let me put it that way, that they all share, it is a love for the outdoors. It's a love for being out there, and they don't want to be anchored to a desk somewhere. They don't want to be inside doing the job. There's there's that trait. The other is a lot of them are super smart. I mean, they could have gone on to be doctors or lawyers or you name it. I mean, they're really smart people, but they chose to be conservation officers because they love what they do. And they put that quality of life segment of being a conservation officer first. But you do come in contact with some really talented people, don't you?
Yes, sir. We, of course, we have to have at least 2 years of college or 64 hours, and that's a big factor in it. But, we've hired folks, obviously, with a 4-year degree that could have went elsewhere, or we've got a few folks that have master's degree, and we've got one or two that, they have their doctorate degree. So we've got a lot of educated folks, but not only that, even the folks like myself, that just have the 2-year junior college degree, which, trust me, I'm not one of those people that could have been a doctor that you were talking about, but we have some very, very sharp people.
Okay. So, you just mentioned the education requirements. What are some of the other requirements of a Mississippi conservation officer?
So, one, they got to be at least 21 years of age before we can hire them. And the only other thing is if they don't have the 64 hours of college, they can be 2 years of prior sworn law enforcement, meaning they've been to a full-time police academy and got 2 years of experience under their belt. That will suffice for the college education.
Yeah, that's some really good experience coming into that job. How many people do you find in that position where they're coming in as a former, law enforcement officer?
Our average class is probably 10 to 15 people. And I would say probably out of those 10 to 15, we usually hire anywhere from 2 to 5 prior sworn. Everybody else is pretty much brand new.
It's great. It's great to have that mix of people, though, isn't it? They learn from each other, and it makes the classes pretty dynamic, doesn't it?
It does. We typically try to, I don't want to say separate the prior sworn from the new ones, but in all, once again, everything we do is for a reason, but we want the brand new ones to start thinking on their own and not completely rely on the prior sworn. So usually the first 3 or 4 weeks, the leadership, the cadet leadership here at the academy is strictly the brand new ones that have no clue about, how to properly make up a bed according to our standards, how to shine boots, how to march. So I don't want to say they learn the hard way, but they have to learn on their own. They don't have somebody holding their hand doing it for them. So the prior sworn kind of take a back seat first part.
So there is literally kind of a boot camp scenario to it, isn't there?
It is. I mean, it's a structured, and it's like I tell every cadet and everybody that asks me about it, pretty much everything we do, every single class is the same. Now, depending on, how well the class starts coming together as a team, kind of depicts or determines the time frame on it. But outside of that, pretty much everything that we do is the same class to class.
So, Brent, it's really interesting. We're visiting, incidentally, with Brent Madden, who's over the Mississippi Conservation Officers Training Academy. and someone I really enjoy. He's been on the show many, many times. We got less than a minute to go. What keeps you motivated, Brent?
Just the idea of that we're training folks to go out and make an impact on, if it's just one person's life that they make an impact on, to encourage them to do this, or to encourage them to, hey, I'm going to keep my family hunting. I'm going to keep this a tradition. But the biggest thing is making a difference. We're pushing folks out of here. We're training them standard to make a difference. That's the ultimate goal, is to make a difference.
When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with newly appointed Major Brent Madden from the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. We're visiting with Major. He just became a major. Brent Madden from the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. He's over the Conservation Officer Training Academy, and he's someone I love touching base with. So if someone's listening to the show today and they heard us discuss the requirements of becoming a conservation officer, what would you say to them to say, give it strong consideration? Because, what's your why and because becoming a conservation officer?
The biggest why is, if you're brought up in the outdoors, and I think I've said this on the show before, is, I grew up hunting and fishing. Wasn't just something we did for fun. It was a tradition, a way of life. And if you want to extend that way of life and tradition, what better job to have than to be a conservation officer? You're always in the woods or outside or on the water. But not just that, you're dealing with what you love. Whether it's checking hunters, checking boaters, things of that nature, you're making a difference for future generations to come.
It is so important. I would, if I think about this, I would say most important, saving lives, the safety aspect of what you do. People tend to think, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, tend to think of conservation officers being sort of hunting season driven, but that's not, these guys work around the clock and 365 days a year. And, the amount of work they do in the water in the summertime is really important. So thinking about people who drink and drive boats, who don't have the proper safety equipment in their boats. But what happens is the longer you do, I was a former paramedic, so I can really relate to this. The more you do your thing, the more likely it is, Brent, that you're going to see something that is the result of someone not paying attention to safety. And once you see one or two or three of those things, maybe it only takes one, it creates a compelling case for action in you to stop whatever that unsafe practice was for other people so you can save their lives. But boy, that is a big part of what you do, isn't it?
It is. And of course, I know I keep saying, everything we do here is for a reason, but week one, they knock out first aid, and not only first aid, CPR, AED, all that stuff, and get certified, but they also do wilderness first aid. So, they knock out the first aid, and then they start doing scenarios on, somebody fell out of a tree stand, how to treat it, or if somebody got shot, how to treat it, whatever it may be. And the last day, we actually get a helicopter, as long as the weather's fine, they're not out on a call. We actually do a scenario where we call in a helicopter, they land on our PT field, and, we load a patient up. So it's a lot of hands-on training to prepare them for, situations like you just said, safety issues, or just not thinking, things happen, but it's usually a safety violation that causes it.
Listen, Brent, we're going to be doing, we'll be doing full shows going into the hunting season. We always do, focused on all kinds of things. But like, for example, safety, using safety straps on leaning ladder stands, replacing the straps on those leaning ladder stands, basic stuff that people don't pay attention to. One of the things that people really take for granted, boy, I've heard horror stories about this, is basic gun safety. That what happens is you just kind of drop your guard. You forget some of the basic stuff, like unloading your gun when you before you get out of a stand, and don't ever have a loaded gun in your truck because it could shift and go off. That's happened. I've heard stories like that. Shooting a deer and then forgetting, putting another bullet into the chamber and forgetting to put the safety on, and just literally brushing that trigger can set that gun off. It can be a very dangerous sport if we are not careful, and being reminded of the basics. We cannot do that enough, can we?
No, and that's through my 21 years of military. One of the biggest sayings we had was complacency kills, and you described that to a T. When we take stuff for granted, and we forget we loaded that, or we forget we didn't unload it. A lot of the tree stand accidents, the people have a safety harness, but they'll climb up and down without it, and they'll put it on when they get up where they're hunting. But most of your tree stand falls occur when you're climbing up or climbing down. And, it's complacency. We do something so much, even just like driving a vehicle, we do something so much that we think, okay, well, this is just every day. I do this every day. What could happen? And that's where complacency steps in and causes a problem.
Listen, I hunt with the Dunn family up in the Mississippi Delta, and one of the young men in the family, his name is Jackson. He's a terrific young man. I used to hunt with him. But his father and others that took him hunting taught him, keep the gun unloaded till you get in the stand, and he takes his backpack out, takes the box out, I'm taking the bullets out now. He says out loud, he loads his gun, he handles it properly. When the hunt's over, he says, okay, I'm unloading my gun now. He takes that box back out of his backpack, puts the bullets exactly where they're supposed to go, and puts his box where it goes in his backpack. Learning those rudimentary efforts and saying it out loud, what a beautiful thing to teach a kid about safety. We should be doing more of that. I'll probably have you back in the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll talk through all these safety things. So from now, Major Brent Madden from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
Have a great day.